Well, welcome everybody to our November 17th, 2015 Ogden City Redevelopment Agency special meeting. Let the roll call reflect that all board members are present. And the first item on our agenda is reports from the administration, land transfer development agreement from the Lotus Group, or rather to the Lotus Group.
Thank you. Good evening. I appreciate your time. We have two great projects to talk about tonight. The first one, as you mentioned, is the land transfer and development agreement between the agency and the Lotus Group. And the Lotus Group actually consists of a few entities: Lotus Thorstenson, Lotus Hearst, Lotus Grant, and Lotus Ogden collectively. So I'll explain that in just a moment. Let me start by putting this project in a little bit of context. We previously presented to the board, and you folks passed the Kiesel CDA. I'm not sure if this is going to focus very well. Maybe it's my eyes. Yeah. Well, the orange line, you almost had it. The orange line is the boundary for the Kiesel CDA, as you may recall. And this area was targeted for a few reasons, one of which is the number of key historic buildings that are significant and, ironically, vacant. And so we presented this to the board, and this was passed in September of this year. And as a result of that, we are now bringing to you the first project in this district. Now that you have that focused on that one, let's look at that. Yeah. And I'll move this around. So what this land transfer and development agreement contemplates is the redevelopment of a number of projects inside both the Kiesel CDA and also the Ogden River RDA, which is up in this area here. So let me start by identifying the projects, and if I need to zoom in for any reason, please let me know. So the first project here is the Hearst building. This is 24th Street here. This is Grant. Kiesel Avenue is here. So this building has been previously unoccupied for the most part. There is one tenant in the bottom that rents. It's Ray's Barber. But the top floor has been vacant for a number of years. I understand there was a technical college up there at one point. But it is vacant now, and this was part of an acquisition that we did to acquire a lot of this property here to accommodate a future parking structure, which is where this blue area is. So this, for your reference, is the Hearst building. These buildings here, which is on Grant Avenue, again, 24th, 23rd, this is the Thorstenson building, and next to it is the Proudfit building. Both of those buildings are vacant. The Proudfit building has undergone a facade renovation over the last few years from the current owner, but other than that, they have been vacant for a number of years. Wonderful buildings. The Thorstenson building was the home of the Utah Woolen Mill. The Utah, now I'm getting them confused. Sewing company. At any rate, they sewed materials for World War II and some other prominent things. They sewed materials for the LDS Church. So they were a great company, and they purpose-built that building for their company. Mr. Thorstenson was the owner. Proudfit was an old sporting goods company, and it's a smaller building. It's around 7,000 square feet on the main floor and 7 on the second floor. So those two buildings are wonderful. They overlook the ball field. They're right along Grant Avenue, and they're just kind of tucked in there quietly and present a lot of opportunity for some companies who may want to locate there. The other property that we're speaking of in this agreement are the Riverbend properties here along Park Boulevard and Grant Avenue. These properties are currently just vacant land. They are part of the Ogden Riverbend Master Plan, and so they're kind of held under those design guidelines and zoning ordinance regulations. So those are the properties that the agreement contemplates, and what we wanted to try to do is to, first and foremost, get the Thorstenson building developed and occupied. Unfortunately, that building, those two buildings, Thorstenson and Pradfit, are large. They require a lot of work in terms of renovation. The price of the buildings is not relative to market comparables, and just the cost of bringing it into current code conditions is very expensive, which is some of the reason why it's been sitting vacant for so many years. It is a very economically challenging endeavor to do. But we feel that it has significant opportunities, again, to contribute to not only creating jobs and to attracting companies, but to add to the architectural fabric and heritage of the downtown. As you know, we have the Grant Promenade that is intended to run along the Grant corridor there. And so once the promenade passes in front of this building, then its commercial viability diminishes because the promenade is meant to reduce vehicular traffic and to promote pedestrian traffic. So the timing's great, and it's a wonderful opportunity to add to that area. It, as I mentioned, overlooks the ball field and has some really neat features. In a typical situation, a developer would come to us and potentially look for an incentive via tax increment or some other means in which they could receive a subsidy to overcome some of the economic challenges that are associated with the building. In this case, working with the Lotus Group, who is behind me, actually the entire group, Brian Wrigley in the nice blue blazer is here representing the Lotus Group. He is actually the group doing the Kiesel building, which is back down here. So he's purchased that building and is actively engaged in its redevelopment. So he was interested in seeing these units here, or this building, become similar units as the Kiesel building, which would be urban loft apartments. They have a similar layout in nature, and the exposed brick and wood floors and those type of things really lend to that urban loft product that we don't currently have in Ogden, but does really well in other markets. So Mr. Wrigley was very interested in seeing that development happen so close to his other property. And instead of going a traditional route in terms of the incentive that is normally offered, we looked at potentially getting some productivity out of all of these properties at once. And so before you have a resolution approving an agreement that would allow for the development of the Thorstenson building, it would also allow for the development of the Hearst building, it would allow for the development of the Riverbend property, and then one thing I failed to mention when I was going over the list of properties, it would also allow for the development of the corner property here on 24th and Grant. Let me show you what some of those look like, and then cover some of the deadlines that the developer would be under as we go through this process. All of these pictures are attached to the agreement, so they would be considered development guidelines in terms of the things that the developer would be required to meet, but they are concept. So that is a concept that would be required to be held to as the Riverbend properties would be developed. This is more of an aerial view. So again, Park Boulevard is here. You have Bingham Cyclery, which is an existing building there. The development guidelines and the agreement would require Lotus to develop this property in a similar fashion as shown. This would be required to go through the ordinary approval rounds that a normal project would go through. But again, this location is confined by the master plan, the Ogden Riverbend master plan, and some of the mixed-use ordinances. So this is something that has already been compared and kind of vetted through those two elements, the guidelines and the ordinance. So this is a very buildable project. This building is an apartment building that houses 44 apartment units. These are townhomes similar to the townhomes that are being built by others on this side of Park Boulevard. There's 13 of those. And this area here is 7,000 square feet of retail space or commercial space that would connect the parking lot that exists now with Bingham's. It would kind of connect a larger parking lot using the same access, and you would be able to get full circulation through here, and these two things would read nicely off of one another instead of having kind of an abrupt ending to the commercial space here. It now kind of creates that inner courtyard. So that's the two-dimension elevation. This is what that courtyard would look like with the new commercial buildings, the new apartment buildings, and just off to the side here is the new townhomes. One thing that is important to consider in the Riverbend master plan is the north-south corridor connections to the river. So we paid special attention of making sure that those connections remained, that it brought folks that are walking through the residential development to the south, it brought them through the new mixed-use development to the bridge, which is here, giving them the ability to cross the bridge. And then as we look at future development across the river, we would look to connect all of that together in a very aesthetically pleasing fashion with uses that were compatible with one another. So
Is there green space right next to those condo units going down to the river?
you mean here?
Uh-huh.
Yes, so.
Where the river is,
Here?
yeah, so you have green space there. So
Right,
going-
there's actually a riparian offset, so the riparian offset is approximately right there where that trail would be. So all of that is already a protected area that couldn't be built on, so it would be enhanced through green space development. And this is an important feature too, as we've turned this apartment unit, or this apartment building towards the river, it gives maximum views to the maximum number of units there to the river. So it's a really interesting concept that allows them to take advantage of that river with parking underneath. You can see that we have an access point here. So again, this is concept, but it is an exhibit to the agreement, and so we would expect that this concept is followed to the extent that is allowable through the ordinance and through the plan submission and approval. So that's the Riverbend property. The corner property, as it's described in the agreement, which again is the corner of 24th and Grant, that property has a concept design associated to it, something like this. What we're looking to have happen on that corner is a mixed-use building of prominent stature. It's that corner location of Grant and 24th as you come down the viaduct. So we want folks coming into the downtown greeted with a substantial building. And so this rendering is again attached to the agreement as a concept that is intended to be built to. And what that would bring is some commercial space on the bottom with some office space on the top, 2 floors. And as we've discussed this further, this plan, which is fairly old, did not contemplate the intended parking structure that's to be built in this general area. So it designed in this site area its own parking. So this was meant to have self-sufficient parking. With the advent of the new parking structure, this parking could go away and this building could actually be either doubled in size or a building could be, another building could be built on the property with a breezeway through. So we're looking into that. So I expect that actual construction of this lot would be much more significant than what we're showing here on this concept drawing. So that's what's expected to be built on the corner property. I don't have a rendering for the Hearst building here. What we anticipate there and what's stipulated in the agreement is that the developer would allow for a lease or a sublease with Union, which is a makerspace concept that is from a group of folks that derive from Ogden but are coming out of Portland. A makerspace is essentially an area where artists and hobbyists can go and pay a membership to have access to a large amount of machinery and tooling and things like that that they wouldn't otherwise have access to in their normal day-to-day work. And that basically gives us the ability to kind of foster that artistic community, almost like the Weber State Downtown facility does for software developers and entrepreneurs. The Union space would do that for artists. So we're very excited about that. That's what is contemplated. First floor of the Hearst building. The developer would be required to build that out and lease that The upper floors would be office. And again, with the advent of the parking structure, all of these uses would be able to be parked here. So this building and this building would be able to be parked here. And then the last requirement would be for the developer to purchase the Thorstenson building. We have both the Proudfit and the Thorstenson building under contract. They would be required to purchase, close on that agreement, and then facilitate the development of both of those buildings, of which they would sell the Proudfit building off to a potential buyer, and then they would develop the upper floors of the Thorstenson building into, again, urban loft condos, about 30 of those, with the first floor being commercial space rented out to, at this point, we have a local architect that's interested, not rented, excuse me, sold off to the local architecture firm, and also bicycle manufacturing company. So to put that all kind of in a one-page context, we have the 24th and Grant property. Its taxable valuation right now is approximately $167,000. We have the Thorstenson building here, which its purchase price, is $1.8 million. The Hearst building, taxable valuation of $135,000, and then the River property, which is values around $1 million. As you see here, these flow through, and if I could go in there. I'm not sure if you could read that. No.
From the bottom, is that what you want?
Yeah, I can move it around. So that blue, there you go. So if you look at the Riverbend properties, the estimated tax increment that we would receive from the development as a result of the incentive of land would be approximately $86,000. If you look at the Hearst building, which is here, I better take the pen off. The Hearst is in the green. The approximate taxable value there, I'm sorry.
525.
So the estimated tax increment received from the development of the Hearst building would be about $525,000. This is in your packet, by the way, so if you want to follow along. A potential tax increment from the Thorstenson would be $1.1 million, and the potential from the 24th and Grant building would be about $862,000. So the intent in doing all of this is to salvage as much of the tax increment as we can and to redirect some of those funds into the parking structure that we hope to build along that area of Kiesel and Grant in that middle section. So essentially, to sum this up, we are looking to convey to the developer vacant property that the RDA owns in exchange for the, certain development criteria that he needs to meet under certain timeframes, all of which would be completed. The Riverbend would be completed no later than December 17th of 2017. The Thorstenson would be finished no later than December of 2016, and the corner property would be finished no later than 2 years after we finish the parking structure. And by doing so, the tax increment, which would roughly be about, I believe it was $2.8 million, it would roughly, that would be redirected to the parking structure. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Brandon? Thank you.
I have one with the Riverbend. Could you review that? I thought the proposal that we had there, that the development would go all the way down to the river, but the individuals developing the Riverbend property do not own that property that we're trading off? That's owned by the city, is that correct?
The property that is subject to this agreement are those three parcels,
Yeah, right, yeah.
those three parcels here, which is about 2.3 acres roughly.
And that's what the city owns there?
That's what the RDA
Okay.
owns. That's what is being included in this package to Lotus Development, yes.
Which we had a previous agreement with somebody
Yes.
to have those developed, and that didn't pan
Right,
out.
so these are unencumbered, so anything, if they were a part of a previous agreement, they no longer are encumbered in any terms. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes. The other one on Grant Promenade, promenade. Does the developer know that we're going to develop Grand Avenue? So he'll work that into his operations there then, his development.
Right. The remaining portions of Grant Promenade have not been funded or approved, so it is still a concept right now, but he's aware of the concept of what we would like to do there. Clearly, we have 2 blocks that are completed, and it's obvious where that's intended to go.
So would the developers contribute at all to those road improvements through there? Or?
That's yet to be determined. Typically, if development is happening prior to the promenade, similar to what we've seen at the PEG development, their development happened prior to the promenade improvements. So they were required to kind of match up some of the things that we anticipate the promenade, including colored concrete, widths of sidewalk, things like that. Because this is an existing building with an existing sidewalk, development would most likely be complete before the promenade even started, then I wouldn't suspect so.
Any other questions for Brandon? You get the award for creativity on this one. This is
Well, thank you for your support and sticking with us. It's been fun.
Thank you. We do have the developer here and would like to give you a minute. I didn't catch your last name. I'm sorry, Brian.
My last name is Brian Wrigley.
Wrigley.
Great. Do you have specific questions, or do you want me to just tell you how fortunate I feel to be able to stand and take a little time this evening?
I think Brandon's answered most of the questions. Do you have any questions for him?
Or anything else you want us to know?
Yeah, what should we know?
It's humbling to be here because developers get maybe at best 2 to 3 opportunities like this in their career. This is by far not the largest projects we've done, but to me, they're very, very special projects. I feel like I'm being given the potential opportunity to come into a core of a city and actually contribute something immediate and something that can be quantified. And Lotus is very, very careful about the projects it undertakes. When we first started entertaining these concepts and working through this, we studied the locations very, very carefully. I don't get a lot of deals, and the reason I don't get a lot of deals through brokers and things is they know how discerning I am. I came from New York. I worked for a very progressive developer back in Manhattan, and he taught me about the value of design-driven projects and focusing on very, very special projects only. So I never anticipate Lotus being the largest developer. It's not my mission plan. It's not my goal. What we do, and what we've consistently been able to do in areas in downtown Salt Lake and onward in Salt Lake County is literally touch the very best and brightest projects, design-driven projects. And so my mission is when someone sees the Lotus sign, they know it's going to be something special because we take that kind of time. And so I'm not coming here as someone who wants to come in the community and I want to leave. When I was in it first, this has been a long, long process. And when I first talked with Tom and Brandon and we were working through this, I kept trying to convince them of our financial ability, 2, of our track record, what we've been able to accomplish. And it was very clear to me that was already vetted. And I'm paraphrasing, but what Tom basically said to me is, we're not looking for someone to come in, develop a project, and leave. We want someone to come in our community, sit down, make roots, be a contributor, a genuine giver in our community. And that's going to start by building projects, but it's also going to start by hiring people and creating jobs and being part of the fabric of the community. And so it was very clear that Tom and Brandon wanted someone to come in and be part of the long-term vision with Ogden. And there's a lot of projects I'm not perfect for. These set of projects I am perfect for. We have a great track record. We've done this very, very successfully. Our financial capacity fits these type of projects to the T. And my company's been named Lotus since 2008. And the reason I named it Lotus is I spent a lot of time in Asia, and I wanted my company and the projects I touch to mirror the life cycle of the lotus flower. So the life cycle of the lotus flower, it starts in the mud, comes through the murky, swampy water, and emerges as a beautiful lotus flower, so to speak, on the top of the swamp. And so I focus my whole business on asset repositioning, urban infill. That's been my whole business plan. We've won awards, we've won design awards, we've been recognized. Almost every project we've touched is, wow, we didn't know you could do something that special in that location. And so this is a very, very unique opportunity. We've already hired a project manager that's starting January 1 to help with the initiatives in downtown Ogden. They'll be based in the bottom of the ground floor of the Kiesel building in an office. We anticipate that staff will be about somewhere between 3 and 5 by summer. And this is a work in progress. I see the design criteria. I understand what's wanted. And I actually, and I mean this respectfully and humbly, I think we'll actually eclipse that. I think we'll come to something that's even bigger than the vision that's already here. And I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity to be, considered for this chance. And I know a lot of confidence is being put on my organization's shoulders and my partners. And I know we'll deliver. It's, we focus on commitment-driven partnerships. And my goodness, after this, I don't know if I'd feel comfortable passing Ogden on I-15 if I don't perform. So I appreciate the opportunity. I'm open to questions, or if you want to better understand my organization and my background, but I am grateful to have this opportunity potentially.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to make a statement. I think you hit the point that we're looking at, is that it's the core of Ogden City, the business district, and you're developing that aspect. And so if you're successful, then that relates back to our business district and the core of Ogden and brings more individuals and people into our area. But you've had other projects in Ogden that we're aware of. Do you want to relate to that aspect and some of the projects you had in Salt Lake? And the other question I had is that you're creating jobs, but when you go out and purchase the supplies and that, are you using local suppliers to do that, to buy your products to put into these buildings?
Trying to think which question to start at.
Well, why don't you go over some of the projects that you've had, not only here in Ogden, but in Salt Lake, and then go to the use of buying your supplies through local dealers and that.
Right. So we don't currently have a finished project in Ogden right now. We're working on Union Square, which we are waiting for a final no further action letter before we can commence that. We purchased Kiesel, let's see, about 30 days ago. We've already retained Pantone Architect Group, which is a local right up the street here, to do our work for that. We only bid local architects on that project, even though I'd had a lot of experience with both out-of-state architects and architects in Salt Lake. We only bid the project to people who were basically longtime Ogden service providers, being the architects. That project we anticipate will submit a full set of construction documents January 1. That's the contract date that my architect has to deliver on per our agreement. So I think you'll see construction on that project no later than mid to late first quarter, and that's a little bit of the function of the city, but as far as my part of it, we anticipate to break sometime in late first quarter and have that project. We anticipate a 6-month build out. So that's our first one. Now, why we're excited about this is we do our own building. My partners in the building company are longtime Davis and Weber County contractors, and they only use small and basically subs. That when I'm taking them down to Utah County, they don't even want to go down that way. It's that local of a group. So one thing we're excited about is we tried to time our process to be in line with the Kiesel renovation. We would do her simultaneously. While my subs are deployed on that area, we would do Thorsissen simultaneously while my subs are deployed there. I can get some economic benefit by having everyone there moving through 3 buildings instead of sending them elsewhere and then bringing them back for staging. So I hope that helped a little.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Looking forward to some good projects.
Great, thank you very much.
All right. Do we have a motion on this resolution?
I will make a motion that we actually, is this one where we're substituting the,
No, that's not till after.
that's the next one? Oh, well, in that case, I will just happily make the motion to adopt this resolution.
And second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember, or Board Member Gochner, seconded by Board Member Garner, to adopt Resolution 2015-18. This is a roll call vote.
Board Member Blair.
Aye.
Board Member Garner.
Aye.
Board Member Gochner.
Aye.
Board Member Stevens.
Aye.
Board Member Wicks.
Aye.
Vice Chair White.
Aye.
Chair Heyer.
Aye, that passes. Okay, the next item is consideration of adjourning into a closed executive session. Do we have a motion?
Higher, I'll make a motion that we adjourn into the closed executive session. Second.
I have a motion by Board Member Garner, seconded by Board Member Blair to move into a closed executive session. This is a roll call vote.
Board Member Garner.
Aye.
Board Member Gochner.
Aye.
Board Member Stevens.
Aye.
Board Member Wicks. Board Member Blair.
Aye.
Vice Chair White.
Aye.
Chair Heyer.
Aye, that's unanimous. We will be back in this room to conclude this agenda. Okay, looks like we're ready to go again. This is reconvening of the Ogden City Redevelopment Agency special meeting of November 17th, 2015. We are on item 4 of our agenda, which is Village Center Development Real Estate Purchase Contracts. And we will hear from Mr. Cooper. Welcome.
Thank you. So this is part 2 of our amazing project evening. You've heard part 1, so thank you for your time again. I decided to use some slides off the computer, so I hope, because of this malfunction here, so I hope everyone can see that okay. So the resolution before you is 2015-19, which is a resolution approving 2 purchase contracts, one between the agency and Bailey Ogden Boris, and the other between the agency and KZ LLC. The Bailey Ogden Boris contract is for roughly 4.7 acres, which incorporates these 2 large buildings here. This is the Rite Aid building. Rite Aid currently occupies that space. This is the IGA building, and this property takes the shape roughly of that right there, and that's 4.7 acres. The terms of the contract include a purchase price of $2.2 million for all 4.7 acres. That includes the lease with Rite Aid. So Rite Aid as a tenant would come with that acquisition. What's required to close that property would be $1.235 million. So at closing, which is currently scheduled pending approval this evening for November 19th, the agency would be required to bring to closing the $1,235,000, of which $1 million has been previously appropriated, and the remaining amount would be used from RDA housing funds. $965,000 of that purchase price would be carried for a 4-year period, with interest payments being paid on an annual basis of 5% of the total purchase price, with the final principal and interest payment being due November 12th of 2019. The second purchase contract is for roughly 2.3 acres, which is this area right through here. This is the old Wheelwright lumber location. That purchase contract is for $464,000. We would be required to bring to closing, which is scheduled to happen pending approval this evening, January 8th. And we would be required to bring $120,000 to the closing. We would also then pay the $5,000 that's currently in escrow that's been paid out of other funding sources, for a balance to be carried over a 4-year period of $339,000. That promissory note would carry a 6% interest rate, again with equal annual payments of interest only, with the principal balance being due November 12th of 2019. So we tried to get those promissory notes to track as much as we could. The purpose for this,
Huber?
Yep.
Can I ask a clarifying question? You said that on the Bailey property that we'd have to pay 5% on the total purchase price for over those 4
I'm
years?
sorry, that's a good clarification. No, it would only be on the promissory note balance, which is $965,000. Thank you. So the purpose why we've targeted this area is for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's a large contiguous tract of land that allows us to do substantial things within the East Central. You would recall that most of the projects that we bring before you are usually limited to 1, 2, sometimes 4, maybe 5 acres, but it's very seldom that we get a 7-acre site that we have the ability to do some tremendous things with. And more importantly, I think, is the location of that 7 acres. It's almost dead center in the East Central neighborhood. It's connected to our historic district. It's connected with our 25th Street access. It's got good access to Lester Park, those type of things. So we have a tremendous opportunity to see something significant there that's going to help this neighborhood. Right now, Rite Aid does produce sales tax for the city. It is a good service to have in that neighborhood, but the IGA is vacant, and the wheelwright is not only vacant, but is scary and needs to come down. So it's in a blighted condition, and we have some great plans for it. One of the plans could include something like this. This is a concept drawing that we did quite a few months ago that would incorporate the Rite Aid as a major user, but then would bring in some assisted living services, which is a growing type of industry. It would bring in some additional commercial. It would enhance the connection east and west and north and south to be able to provide a village type of a setting. A more robust plan would look something like this, where you would move some of those commercial uses to the street frontage of 24th Street and only bring in a north-south connection with an east-west connection that is conducive to pedestrians, and really create that village concept with some housing and some mixed-use opportunities. A three-dimensional drawing is here. So you can see what those types of things could be. Having this amount of land contiguous to each other really gives us an opportunity to go in multiple directions based on opportunities that present themselves and based on the needs of the neighborhood. So these are just two ideas that we've thought through. We feel that this site is big enough to provide commercial and residential types of products, residential being an assisted living, possibly. I would consider that residential. So the site's big enough to offer commercial and residential, and it's big enough to do it in a way that really will enhance the neighborhood. The Oakden Phase 1 project is just kind of northeast of this, and so that would be a great connection to it, and we hope that this will be a ripple to getting some things done in the adjacent neighborhoods. Bless you. So those are the two concepts. That is the terms of the Rep C. I don't know if you can see that, but this is a sources and uses schedule here that shows the $1 million. Make that a little bigger for you. So we show the $1 million previously approved, the $389 coming out of the RDA housing, and a $61,000 loan from the HELP fund to be determined in terms of approval. That is not necessary to close. That's necessary to complete some of the demolition that's required in the KZ LLC acquisition. But to close, we would only be required to have the $1 million and the $389. So you'll see the uses on that. The Bailey Ogden Boris contract is the 1235, along with the 120 for the KZ, which brings us to 1355. The demo has an estimated cost of $67,000, and then we have some commissions and closing costs that are assumed there as well. So that is the resolution 2015-19. Is there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Cooper? Just as just from my understanding, that bridge loan with the HELP funds that, well, any of those things, it's not required for closing, but you're going to use it for demo? When's,
The demo is a term and condition of the contract, so
Right.
we need to have a funding source for it to be able to do it. We hope that the funds that we're sourcing now, outside funds that would be used to repay those two funding sources, could come in soon enough that we may not need to go into the help fund for the
well, that was my
$61,000.
question. What's the timeline for the demo then?
60 days after
60
closing.
days, so you're going to get on it then, and
That closing is January 8th, so we have 60 days from January 8th. And
so you may need that before budget season again, and.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that helps me. Any other questions for Mr. Cooper?
Mr. Cooper, could you review the terms of the substitute resolution that we've provided?
So the substitute resolution actually addresses that. It addresses the fact that the funds, a portion of the funds that we're using are on loan from the RDA and from city funds, and that the agency is committed to repay those before July 31st of 2016. So that's the language that you would see in
That
the,
catches all of the borrowed money.
that's all borrowed money. The 389, and in the event the 61 is borrowed, that would include that as well.
Okay.
Has to be paid back to the RDA. Yeah.
Wherever it comes
Wherever
from,
it came
right?
from, yeah. In the case of the housing fund, the RDA, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Well, do we have a resolution on, or a motion on Resolution 2015-19?
Chair Heyer, I will make a proposal that we adopt Resolution
Chair,
2015-19.
I think it's appropriate to substitute the resolution
Right.
first and then take action.
Okay. Just for the record, there is substitute language for this resolution 2015-19 that has been distributed to the board members.
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we adopt the substitute resolution.
And I'll second that.
Need a
Right.
motion to substitute and take action, and then
Right.
action on the substitute.
So we'll make a motion to adopt the resolution
Make a motion to
substitution.
substitute the resolution.
Okay, a motion to substitute the resolution for 2015-19.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll second it.
We have a motion by Board Member Garner, seconded by Board Member Wicks, to substitute language for Resolution 2015-19. Is this a voice vote? Or, okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
So with that, now I will make a motion that we adopt Resolution 2015-19 with this new language.
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Board Member Garner, second by Board Member Stevens, to adopt Resolution 2015-19 with the substitute language. This is a roll call vote.
Board Member Gochner?
Aye.
Board Member Stevens?
Aye.
Board Member Wicks?
Aye, but I'm going to say, qualify that vote. I would strongly encourage staff to pursue the village center type idea versus the big box that I don't like.
Okay.
Board Member Blair?
Aye.
Board Member Garner? Vice Chair White?
Aye.
Chair Heyer?
Aye. That passes. Next item on our agenda is public comments. This is an opportunity to address the board regarding your concerns or ideas for the Ogden Redevelopment Agency. Please state your name and address clearly for the record. Limit your comments to 3 minutes. Seeing no movement, RDA Executive Director.
I'd just like to thank the board. These were both very unique issues that you considered and discussed tonight, and I really want to thank Brandon and Tom and Ward for working all of these things out. These are not typical. They're out-of-the-box kinds of projects that have been long latent, and they've put a tremendous amount of time, effort, and energy into this, so we really appreciate and recognize all of your effort. Thank you very much.
Okay, board members, any comments?
I second what the mayor just said.
And I will third it too. I am amazed when CED brings in projects normally, but ones that are like this, I'm impressed by what you're doing. It's
I think it'll
Salute
be,
you.
I think it'll be a positive impact to that East Central area, so.
Okay. All right, if there's no more comments, look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
By Board Member Proctor, seconded by Vice Chair White to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? As a reminder, there will be a city council work session held in the council workroom immediately following, and the items to be discussed are on the agenda.